So yesterday I had some heavy cream that was left out on the counter. I don't know how I missed that, but it reached room temperature when I discovered it, and I knew it would go bad if I just put it back into the fridge. So I decided to show my son how to make butter. I remember doing this in elementary school. My school teacher would pour heavy cream in a jar, and she would pass it through the classroom, and we'd shake it until it turned into butter. So for the sake of giving you a recipe, you'll want to start with 16 ounces of heavy whipping cream and add like 1/8 of a teaspoon to 1/4 teaspoon of salt and start to shake. And it does take time. So I decided to let my son shake the little bottle here. I gave it to my husband and then back to me. So after about 10 minutes, I realized there was no more room in the bottle to shake, so I decided to add my 16 fluid ounces of heavy cream into a 32-ounce jar. Now I can comfortably shake it. So for another maybe 7 minutes, you'll see the result where everything starts to separate and you get like this clump of butter. And the butter separates from the buttermilk. And this is not cultured buttermilk like what you would buy at the grocery store, but you can use this in baking or pancakes. So you can definitely reserve this for later use. So I've strained out the buttermilk and I'm going to set that aside. And now you'll want to get cold water and basically rinse out any residual buttermilk from the butter. If you don't do this step, then your butter will spoil. So you want to make sure you clean it and pour the cold water over it to make sure the water runs clear. So once you've rinsed it in cold water, you'll want to store it. I'm just going to place it in a smaller mason jar. Carefully, that is. And it's not perfect, but I did make it from scratch at home, and it's good. It tastes really good, and it's easy to make with a little elbow grease. So what I'm going to do is add just a small piece of wax paper to kind of seal it, because there will be a gap in the jar. It doesn't fill it to the top, and then you just enclose it, and you can keep this on the countertop. So I've made butter yesterday, and today I'm making soft flour tortillas, but I'm simplifying the recipe. I will be using self-rising flour, and in place of the lard, shortening, or bacon fat that I like to use in the dough, I'm using 3 tablespoons of avocado oil. And here I have very hot water, about 8 fluid ounces, and the self-rising flour already has the baking powder and salt in it. But I will show you my original recipe for homemade from scratch flour tortillas, and here it is. So you can definitely follow that, and I will link my older recipe video for soft flour tortillas that I've posted long ago. And there's that. But today I'm doing something a little different for my people that always ask me, can I use cooking oil in place of the fat? Well, you absolutely can, and I will show you. So I'm just going to measure out my 3 cups of self-rising flour. Now, if you were doing weighted measurements, it's about 400 grams of flour, self-rising flour. I'm just sort of following my original recipe with this. So now I'm going to add my avocado oil and my hot water, as hot as your hands can take it. It doesn't have to be boiling. So I'm just going to start by mixing with a chopstick, or you could use a spoon, fork. And then once it starts to mix and the water saturates the flour, it's kind of safe to go in there with your hands. If you start too early, it just makes a sticky mess. So I'm going to continue to combine the flour and the ingredients together until a dough ball forms, and then I'm going to flour my work surface and continue kneading until it's somewhat smooth. So at this point, if you're working with your dough after you flour your work surface, the dough should still be kind of sticky and tacky. If it's too wet, then add a little bit more flour into the mix, maybe a tablespoon at a time. And if it's too dry, you'll want to add more hot water. I'm going to show you after kneading, it should really be soft and tender and stretchy. If it doesn't stretch like this, you'll probably need to add moisture to it. You'll need to add more water, because if you don't at this point, you will end up with a very dry flour tortilla. So this is kind of the texture of the dough you're looking for. So I'm going to separate these into dough balls. Somewhere between 14 to 16 dough balls you can get out of this dough. And I like to do the tuck and turn motion for each dough ball. You don't have to do that. That's just something that my grandmother taught me when I was a kid. So my dough ball is formed, and I'm going to place it back into my bowl and repeat the process for the rest of the dough. So here I have 16 dough balls. I'm going to place a very damp paper towel over it and let it rest for 15 minutes. Once my dough has rested, I want to show you the texture. It's a bit smoother, and once again, it needs to be stretchy like this. See how I can stretch it before it breaks? That is a good indication that your dough is ready to be rolled out. If it snaps back or breaks too quick, that means it needs to rest, or like I stated earlier, it needs more water in the mix. So I'm going to flour my work surface and take one of my dough balls, and I'm going to start rolling them out. I understand that a lot of people have a hard time getting round tortillas. Practice makes perfect. It doesn't matter what shape it is. If you have the right texture dough, it's still going to taste good. So don't be so hard on yourself. I also want to mention that over the years in the comments section, I have a lot of people that use the tortilla press to press out round tortillas. You definitely can do that. You can hand press these like what you would use for the corn tortilla masa. You definitely can give that a try. I'm just a creature of habit, and I always roll them out with a rolling pin. So here I have my first tortilla rolled out, and I'm going to show you. I like to do about 3 or 5 before I start to cook them, because it allows the dough to rest on the side of the bowl. And a well-rested dough will give you those nice air bubbles, and it'll cook a lot more evenly. So I'm just going to repeat the process and roll out about 3 to 4 more. Now it is equally important to preheat your griddle. So you'll want to do that while you're rolling these out. Okay, so let's cook the first one. And it has rested very well, so I should get some good air bubble action here. So here on my griddle, I'm going to carefully place it. I'm doing this one-handed, so not perfect. Whoops. And here we go. As soon as you place the dough onto your preheated griddle, you should see a reaction. You should start to see little air pockets form on the surface. If you do not, that means your griddle needs to be hotter. It should react within the first 5 seconds, because if it's not hot enough, you'll end up with basically a flour tortilla tostada. It'll be crispy and dry. So you want to do this fairly quickly with a hot griddle. And you can flip it 2 to 3 times. Here, I'll probably flip it again to make sure this side gets a little more browning before it's done. So once your tortilla is done, you'll want to place it into a kitchen cloth or something that you can wrap it and close it and place it into another container. And this is going to keep all of your tortillas soft and pliable and warm. So I know a lot of you growing up loved butter on a hot, fresh tortilla, and that's exactly what we are doing today. Check out my butter. I'm so proud of myself. I made homemade butter. My son really got a kick out of this. So typically growing up, someone was always over the stove making tortillas, and somebody would come by, sneak one, and add butter to it and make that butter taco. And it's as simple as that. So all of these tortillas are ready for breakfast tacos, burritos, because they are soft and pliable. So I want to show you the breakfast that my abuelita still eats. She's been eating this for the last 70 plus years. This is her when she was young, in her teens, and that's around the time she lost her mother. She was raised by her father or by a single parent. Eventually, she met my grandfather and they married, and they had lots of kids. She has 9. And she still makes fresh tortillas. She's the coolest lady I know. So this is her favorite breakfast. A hot cup of coffee with evaporated milk, specifically leche pet, as she calls it, no sugar, and she gets a warm flour tortilla, slathers it in butter, and just one. And this is her favorite breakfast. And this was out of necessity for her because she had lots of kids to feed, so she would allow herself one tortilla and a cup of coffee in the morning. So I dedicate this video to her. Abuelita Angelica, te quiero muchísimo. I hope you give this recipe a try. I hope you like it, and thanks for watching.